What is up, everybody? In this video, I'll be discussing how you can get your first wholesale deal in 30 days and make $20,000. I know you've been like, I tried that numerous times and I just give up. And see, that's the problem. You should never ever give up. Now, in this video, I'm going to give you some step-by-step strategies that you can take to avoid the same hiccups that I had at the beginning of the process. It took me 2 years to get my first deal, and it was all my fault because I wasn't being consistent. I was jumping from different marketing channels when I should have just stick to the ones that I could afford at the time, and it prolonged my process. But now, since I got systems in place, I'm actually using a different style of marketing, which I'm going to get into in this video. You will see how I'm able to generate deals every couple of months. Also, before we get into it, just take 1 second, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, cut on the notification bell, because that'll actually help these type of videos rank in YouTube and help with me getting into the algorithm of YouTube. So take 1 second to do that because it really helps out the channel. I'm trying to hit 70 subscribers by the end of the month. Let's get it, y'all. Let's work together and get this done. Now let's get back into the video. Now that we getting into it, I need you to think about this. How could you actually start something if you don't have a solid foundation? So in order to have a solid foundation, you need to research a little bit more about wholesaling. I'm going to make a series on the wholesaling videos and the tools that I use. And you know, if you're interested in learning the whole process, the insides and out, and you're a reader, you like to read books, this book, if you can't wholesale after this, if you take the time to actually read this book, I promise you will leave with a solid foundation to where you're ready to get started. And the good thing about it, the book is only $19.99 off of Amazon. I purchased this book years ago when I got started. And that's just going to help build that solid foundation to where you know, okay, I need an AB contract, I need a CB contract, I need to get in contact with attorneys, I need to go find buyers. It'll just build that solid foundation and make the process of wholesaling very understandable. Now, another book that would actually help push you forward as well too is this book right here, the book on investing in real estate with low and no money down. That book actually introduced me to wholesaling. The last chapter of the book was the largest part of the book, and it brought wholesaling to my attention because I realized that I can get into it with pretty much no money or credit. So take time and build that solid foundation first, and then continue with the steps that we're getting ready to get into. And like I said, it'll just make the process way easier for you. So the links to these two books that I just mentioned would actually be below in the description as well. So definitely feel free to check them out. Now, step one, the very first thing you should do is figure out what market that you want to be in. So in the great part about it now, in today's age of wholesaling, you're able to go in any market that you would like to go in. You can go into any virtual market. You can be in Miami, but you can be wholesaling in South Carolina. Or you can be in South Carolina and be wholesaling in North Carolina. So take time, use population websites to see where there is a huge population, where there's a medium size and a low size population. Of course, you want your markets like your Miamis or your Charlottes to try to pull deals out of every single month. But these medium sized markets, they're going to allow you to pull consistent deals every single month with a tad bit less competition because no matter where you go, it's going to be other wholesalers in the market. So get it out your mind that you'll run into a market where nobody's going to be in, because if nobody is in it, 9 times out of 10, it's not a good market. So that's step one. Identify a market to go in. After you identify your market, the next part of the process would actually be pulling a distress list. You don't want to go after a list that doesn't have any distress. Like, you wouldn't want to go just pull a high equity list, because a lot of those sellers that on there, a lot of those homeowners that are on that list, 9 times out of 10, they don't have any type of motivation. Now, whenever you go pull a vacant list or a pre-foreclosure list or a tired landlord list, you know that there is potentially motivation there. Because if it's a vacant property, no one is living there, but whoever owns the property is paying property taxes, they're paying code violations if no one is keeping up the property. So the property is actually taking money out of their pocket. So eventually they may want to sell. Pre-foreclosure, you may have a seller that is living in a home that they can't afford to pay the mortgage. And they probably want to list it with a realtor, but they may not have enough equity in it to where they can list it with a realtor. So you may have to structure a seller finance deal that will make sense to that particular seller to get the deal done and put that problem behind them. So those are the lists that you want to go after. My ideal list whenever you first starting out is pulling a vacant list, and then after you pull that vacant list and you still have some of the 10,000 records left over, then that's when you start going into pre-foreclosure and tied landlords. But you still have to learn the process of pre-foreclosure because it can be different in every city. And if you still have records left over after you hit all of the stress lists, then you start going into pulling absentee lists. Once you pull absentee lists, which it's going to be thousands and thousands of records depending on the market that you're in, that's when you start pulling a large chunk of data outside of the software that I'm going to mention in the next video. And it'll allow you to begin to stack your data as well too once you start pulling absentee high equity or something like that. So that will be the next step in the process. Pull a list. So the next part of the process, after you pull your list, whether it's the vacant list, pre-foreclosure, or whatever it is, the next part of it is skip trace your list. I know you're probably, what in the world is skip tracing? Skip tracing is simple. All you're doing is, once you pull your list out of the software that I'm going to mention, you're actually going to export it and import it into a skip tracing service that will give you phone numbers, it'll give you mobile numbers, landlines, and it'll give you emails. Once you receive those, then you go into the process of being able to make calls, send text messages, or whatever you plan on doing for marketing channels. So that's pretty much all it is to skip tracing. Now, you have to make sure whenever you import into these systems, into these softwares, that you're importing them correctly, because if not, you can get a lot of mix-up data, you can get a lot of wrong phone numbers if you're not following that process. I'm going to give you the skip trace service that I use, and you're welcome to use it. But that's pretty much the skip tracing step is all about, getting the homeowner's information. Let's go to the next step. All right, so as you can see, we started by building this foundation, finding the market, pulling the list, skip tracing the list. So the next part is marketing to your list. It's as simple as that. So whenever it's time to market to a list, you have many different options. You can send text messages, you can cold call, you can send ringless voicemails, you can use Google ads, Facebook ads, direct mail, bandit signs, driving for dollars. It all just depends on your budget. You can do all of them. But when you're first starting out, I would recommend using the cheapest option, unless you have a lot of money and you can afford to spend the money to do all the forms of marketing. But I would just start out with text messaging, ringless voicemails, and cold calling. Once you hit all your prospects with 4 touches with cold calling, text messages, ringless voicemail, then you go to a more expensive form, which would be next for me, would be direct mail, to where you can actually, it's almost like a door knock for the seller, but it's just going into their mailbox, because you don't know if the numbers that you're calling are correct at that point after you done send 4 messages. So now it's time to door knock. So you can door knock easily by sending a direct mail piece to the seller. So those are the forms of marketing. Where I made a mistake, I actually wouldn't be consistent with one form of marketing if that's all I could afford. I would end up doing bandit signs for a month, doing Google ads for another month, doing text messages for a month, and it was always a break in between. And it took me 2 years. Don't make the same mistake that I made. Use 3 of those marketing channels: SMS, ringless voicemail, cold calling, and sprinkle in some direct mail if you have to, and generate leads. That's called an omni-channel marketing presence. Use that, and I guarantee in a month, 2 months, or whatever, you will get a deal. Let's go to the next step. So once you start your marketing process, you're gonna start generating leads. You're gonna start getting no's. You're gonna start getting, please don't contact me again. And you're gonna start mainly getting a lot of people that say, hey, I'm not ready right now, but I'll be ready in a couple of months. Those folks are the ones that you want to really key in on, because they're going to turn into deals over the next couple of months. So you must have a follow-up system in place. That is the next step. Make sure that your follow-up is on point, because deals will slip through. People that you spoke with months ago will sell, and you won't have any idea that they sold until you research the property at a later date. So a free website that I used when I first started out was Podio. Podio allows you to track your leads and put in detailed information regarding the property condition, and you can set a date to where you can follow up with these sellers to make sure it's not slipping through the cracks. And once you start bringing in more money, you can actually automate some of it by getting a custom built Podio to automatically follow up with sellers that have mobile numbers. So that is your next step, getting your follow-up in place and following up with sellers. Now, the next step in the process is when you have a seller that says yes. At that point, the next step will be make an offer. So in order to make an offer, you would have to get on the phone with the seller, get the property information, see what condition that is in, if it needs a minimal repair, a cosmetic repair, or major repairs. Then you know the amount of work that needs to be done. On top of that, while you're on the phone with the seller, you need to be looking in that area and seeing what properties are actually selling for in tip-top condition and, medium wear and tear condition and the absolute worst condition that you see in that area, because then you have some type of range of what you can potentially offer. But that is really called running comps. So you would actually have to run comps on the property, which are comparable properties that may be in similar condition of it, to see what you would offer. I have a software for that as well too that is ideal for that, because it'll allow you to run comps on your property to see what you need to offer. So make sure you tune into this next video. I know I keep saying it. Now, after you have that, it is time to have an A/B contract that protects you as the wholesaler, that actually gives you equitable interest in the agreement that will not allow the seller to try to sell to anyone else. And it gives you an inspection period to where you can get in, take pictures, get all the pictures that you need, because you're going to go and find you a buyer to purchase the property from you. So after you collect all that information, it's time to market again. It's the disposition part of it. Market to your buyer. So once you have your agreement into your attorney who's going to open escrow, it's time to market to buyers. So in that process, what will happen is you would use the same software that you pull your list from, that you run your comps on. You will pull a list of buyers in that area that you will have to skip trace and get their phone numbers to market to. And you can use Facebook as well. The Facebook real groups, you can use that, and that'll actually help you find buyers as well too. But I prefer using the paid version where you can get phone numbers and reach out to buyers in that particular area, in a 1 mile radius that buys in that area, or just directly in that area, like the Charlotte area, to buy in that area. So once you identify that, you schedule an open house or schedule a time for each individual buyer to show up to the property to make an offer on the property. But make sure whenever you make an offer on the property, just say you make an offer on the seller property of $200,000, when it comes down to the buyer, you know that that number has to be higher than $200,000 for you to make a profit. So you may have a buyer that come in at $220,000, which is your $20,000 in 30 days. At that point, it's just a waiting process. You have the property lockup. You have your buyer in place after the open house that's ready to sell. You have a buyer in place that's ready to buy the property, to buy your contract, your equitable interest contract from you for $20,000. So from there, you're just waiting on the closing process. The closing process may take a little bit of time. They got to make sure that the title is clear, there's no title issues. And from there, you have $20,000 in your pocket in 30 days. This process is very, very simple. You just have to stick with it, and I promise you it'll definitely work out for you. And it may take a little longer than 30 days. It may take a little less than 30 days. It may take 2 weeks. You just never know. But you have to be willing to get out there and take that risk. And also in this video right here, I went over a deal where I made $8,000 in 15 days. Please take time and check that video out. It's a great story of how it happened, and it was actually my first virtual deal. So check that video out. And if you are interested in other real estate content such as house hacking or investing with no money down, I have other videos that will be here and here that you can check out as well too. And if you enjoy the content, definitely like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. It's going to help the channel to grow. It's going to help take this channel to another level. And I thank you for sticking with me throughout the video. See you next time.